Right. Good afternoon, good people. My name is Hendrik Makaneta, and today I'm going to teach you mathematics, grade 7. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time and the opportunity to be here this afternoon. Please feel free to ask any question or perhaps to make a comment, or if you feel that perhaps I'm too fast, please raise up your hand and stop me so that I can, slower the pace. But I believe that I'll be moving at a very good pace. Therefore, you will be able to follow through the lesson. And of course, my topic today is grade 7 maths, as I've already indicated. And of course, we will be working with fractions, in particular percentage and decimal fractions. So we will look at calculating percentages, converting a percentage to a decimal fraction and vice versa, meaning that we will also convert a decimal fraction into a percentage. Now, without any waste of time, we know that a percentage can be expressed as a fraction. Example, Celine wrote a test and obtained 30 out of 50 marks. Express Celine's mark as a percentage. Now, 30 out of 50, that is the mark that Celine got. She got 30 out of 50. And if we want to calculate a percentage, it means we will have the fraction 30 out of 50, which is a common fraction, and we will multiply that by 100 over 1. And as you can see in the slide, I have calculated. In other words, when it comes to 50, basically 50 into 100 goes 2 times. And you'll be left with 1 there. 50 into 50 goes once. I'm talking about the denominator, and the numerator will be 30. Therefore, 30 times 2 will be 60. So basically, the percentage that Celine got on a test that she wrote, where she obtained 30 out of 50, the percentage mark will be calculated as 60%. I hope that it makes sense. And this, as I've already indicated, means that we have now been able to convert the mark that Celine got, which is represented as a fraction. We've been able to convert a fraction into a percentage. So that is the first thing that I wanted to say this afternoon. And of course, you are going to get examples as we carry on, but I thought that this should be our starting point. Like I've already indicated, if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to make, please feel free at any time. I hope that the slide makes sense. Just to recap, we're looking at the percentage where we are now looking at the mark that Celine got. And of course, she got 30 out of 50. And we're expressing the fraction as a percentage. So like I indicated in the topic, you can express a percentage as a fraction. You can also express a fraction as a percentage. So right now, what we have done was to express a fraction as a percentage. The fraction being 30 out of 50. I hope that everyone can see that. What is important is to note that when you convert a fraction, a common fraction, into a percentage, very important, you need to multiply by 100. Whenever you convert a fraction into a percentage, you need to multiply out that particular fraction by 100. The reason why we write 100 over 1, that's because we are expressing the 100 also as a fraction. That is why we have got 30 over 50 multiplied by 100 over 1. And I think that gives us 60%. Is there any questions so far before we can carry on, especially on this? Mas Chaba, your hand is up. Mas Chaba? But Mimi's hand is up. I'm not so sure if the host can recognize you and unmute you there. Mas Chaba? Right. Without wasting time, let me go to the next slide. Consider the following fractions. We have 0,1, and we want to write 0,1 as a common fraction. Remember that 0,1 is written now as a decimal fraction. And we are now going to convert this decimal fraction into a common fraction. How do you convert a decimal fraction into a common fraction? This means you will have to move the comma. You know, the comma that we have there, between 0 and 1, there's a comma. And if you move the comma only once to the right-hand side, it means that you will now have 1. And because you have moved your comma once to the right-hand side, then it means you must have only 1 0 in the denominator side. So this means 0,1 will be expressed as 1 over 10 or 1/10. You know, you can call it a tenth. And of course, the second one again, 0,01. This can be expressed now. You can see now we are going to move the comma twice. So if I can show you now, it means you take this comma, you move it once, and then twice. Once you have moved it twice, then you'll have 1 in the numerator, and then you'll also have 100 in the denominator. Why do you have 100? Because you have moved a comma twice, unlike in the first one where you move the comma only once. So in this case, 0,01 becomes 100th, which is 1 over 100, as some may call it. And of course, the last one will be 0,001, meaning that there are 3 digits now after a comma. And again, when you move your comma, you'll have to move it 3 times in order to obtain 1 in the numerator. Then, which means that the denominator now becomes 1,000. So you'll have 1,000 or 1 over 1,000. That will be your fraction. So in this case, this means that you have converted your decimal fraction into a common fraction. Now, if you look at the slide that we had before, now before I go back to that slide, the question here now becomes, express the above fractions in percentage form. Now, this is an activity that I want us to all do now. I want us to express the above activities or the above fractions, common fractions, in percentage form. But before you can start, I wish to take you back to the previous slide where Celine got 30 out of 50. And we were able to express this fraction as a percentage. And what did we do? We multiplied the fraction by 100. And of course, this simply means that whenever you've got a common fraction, like the one in the case of Celine, you'll have to multiply it out by 100. And in this case, it's 100 over 1. So, having done this particular example, Celine's example, I want you to go now to the slide that we are in now, where you've got 3 common fractions. The first one is 1/10. The numerator is 1, the denominator is 10. The second one, 100. And of course, that's 1 over, the numerator is 1, the denominator is 100. And the last one is 1,000. That's 1 over 1,000 there. And of course, these are 3 common fractions. Now, I want to recognize 3 hands. The first hand that is going to speak will speak on the first one, which is a 10th, 1/10. I want you to tell me or to convert this particular fraction into a percentage. You must tell me what is the percentage there. And the second hand that is going to speak will speak on the second fraction, which is 0.01 decimal fraction, expressed as a common fraction. The denominator is 100 and the numerator is 1. I want you to express that as a percentage. As a percentage. And of course, the last one will be 1 over 1,000. And I want you to express that as well in the form of a percentage. And of course, that will be the last one. And I think that we can carry on with it. Let's write it in percentage form. Can I give you a minute to do so? But if you're done already, please raise up your hand and let's start with the first one. I want you to write it, express it as a percentage. Right. All right, let's go to Stelo. Stelo.
Hi. Hi.
How are you?
Good and you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good. Sorry, I was just trying to look at you. I wasn't trying to answer.
Okay, you're still trying to figure out.
Yes.
Okay, but tell me, can you hear me properly, Stelo? Am I
Yes,
audible
breaking.
enough?
No, you are
Okay.
breaking.
Am I breaking? All right, let me come closer to the mic. Right, so as Stelo is busy trying to figure out, can we move to another learner? Let's go to Stelo Pili. In fact, let's go to Dalen Pillay. Dalen Pillay, let's go to you. All right, I see Dalen is muted. Let's go to Tandeka now. Tandeka? 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 Right, in the absence of a comment now, I will carry on. We now have 1 over 10. And of course, you will have to multiply that by 100 over 1. And this will actually give you 100 over 10, which is now at 10%. So basically, the first fraction there will give us 10%. So 1/10 is the same as 10%. I'm sure some of you have come across a tenth before. Those who are maybe in various religious communities, I've learned about the tenth that is often, donated to the church. That tenth that they usually talk about, it's 10%, meaning that a tenth or 1/10 is equal to 10%. And how do you find it? How do you find it? So it means you take a fraction which is 1/10, you multiply that by 100. And of course, the answer will be 100 over 10, which is 10. So meaning that now the first category there will be 10%. And the second one will be 1/100. And of course, if you multiply that by 100, the numerator will be now 100 over 100. And of course, this will give you 1%. So you'll have a percentage there. So if you convert 0.01 to a percentage, this becomes just a percentage, that is 1%. And similarly, you have to do the same with the next activity. You've got 1 as the numerator, 1,000 as a denominator. And what do? You multiply this fraction by 100. And of course, you'll have 100 in the numerator now and 1,000 in the denominator. And in big C, that will be left with a 10. That is 1/10. And of course, if you convert that to a percentage, that becomes 0.1%. So the last one there will be 0.1%. All right. Now, let's carry on. Is there any question so far? Right. In the absence of a question, express 0.25 and 0.5 as percentages. Now, if you have to express 0.25 as percentage, just like we did with the previous one, whenever you move a comma twice on 0.25, you move it to the right-hand side, you will have now 25 over 100. And of course, at this point, you've got now a common fraction. So meaning that you have changed your decimal fraction into a common fraction before you can move it to a percentage. And now that we have got a common fraction of 25 out of 100, you multiply it out by 100. And of course, you can see that 100 is the denominator. And once you multiply it with 100, which is a numerator, they will have to cancel out. I'm talking here about 25 out of 100, this particular common fraction. You multiply it out with 100 over 1, 100 and 100 here, which this one is the numerator, and the other one is the denominator. It means you are simply dividing 100 by 100. And what is 100 divided by 100? It's 1, you get 1. So therefore, if you divide 100 by 100, you get 1, which means that 25 times 1 is 25. So your answer there will be 25%. So basically, 0.25 is the same as 25%. And of course, the next one, 0.5. We have 0.5, which can also be expressed as a percentage. But first things first, you need to convert that to a common fraction because it is much more easier to work with common fractions than to zoom directly into a decimal fraction. And of course, as I've indicated, total 0.5 becomes now 5 out of 10. And of course, 5 out of 10 is a common fraction. Never mind about simplifying. If you want, you can simplify 5 over 10. I'm sure all of us can agree, will agree that 5 out of 10 is the same as half. Because 5 into 5 goes once, and into 10 goes twice. So half. Now, if you're going to take the half and multiply it by 100, you'll see that half of 100 gives you 50%. But in the same note, even if you have not simplified the 5 out of 10, you can still multiply by 100. It will lead you to the same answer. And the answer will be 50%. That is how far it goes in as far as this particular activity is concerned. And of course, we can move to the next one, the activity, where I wanted to now calculate. We can take a percentage a little bit further. And this is the last part of working with percentage. Before I get to this part, let me take you back further. When I started, I spoke about Celine. And I said that Celine wrote the test and obtained 30 out of 50 marks. And I said that you must express this common fraction in the form of a percentage, or rather call it in percentage form. And how do you express a fraction in percentage form? You multiply by 100. That is why 30 out of 50, we multiplied that by 100 to get 60%. So that is the first step, where you took a common fraction and you converted it into a percentage. And then we moved a step further, where we converted a decimal fraction into a percentage. So the first one was to convert a common fraction into a percentage, and the second one was to convert a decimal fraction into a percentage. But before you can convert a decimal fraction into a percentage, you must first convert that into a common fraction, because it is much more easier to work with common fractions rather than decimal fractions. And we've already done these examples where we've converted all three of them to percentage. And of course, we also came to express furthermore two decimal fractions, 0.25 and 0.5. We've expressed those as well as percentages. The first one being 25%, followed by 50%. At this point, I want us to look at the percentage in relation to numbers. For example, here's an activity. How much is 1% of 400? How do you calculate 1% of 400? But before I can do it, let me get a participant. I see there are some 3 hands. Let's see. Right. I'm unable to see all of you now. Let's see. Let the grid be bigger now. Yes, now I can see. All right. Let's go to PEC. PEC. All right, PEC, can you repeat that again? All right. And what is your final answer? Your final answer is 4. Okay, so 4 is your final answer. Okay, so how did you calculate that? How did you express your 1%? So your 1% is expressed as a common fraction. You can write it as a common fraction. Remember that a percentage can be written as a fraction. So the first step, in order to write a percentage as a fraction, it means you divide your 1 by 100. 1% simply means you've got 1 out of 100. So 1% is the same as 1 out of 100. And then, of course, you multiply that by 400. So as you said, Peg, you are correct, because 400 divided by 100 gives you 4. So yes, I fully agree with you. 4 is the correct answer in this case. Right, can we go to another hand now? Let's see. How much is 20% of 400? 20% of 400. Let's see. Let's go now to Tandega, still connecting. 20% of 400. Can I see your hands once again? Let me see your hands. Solopili, please go ahead. Solopili, can you hear me? Right, we seem to have lost Solopili there. Okay, Solopili, are you back? Is it Upelong now? I see we've got Upelong. Can you tell us how much is 20% of 400 and how do you calculate it?
Sir, I'm still busy.
Or are you still busy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, give you 30 seconds. All right, thank you, Upelong. If you are ready, you can go ahead.
Oh, sir.
Yes. You've got 20% of 400. Now the first step is
it 200?
okay. So you got 200.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, tell me, how did you get the 200? What did you do to get to 200?
I used a method.
Okay, can you share your method with us?
Sir, I can't hear you.
Can you share your method?
You're breaking, sir.
All right, can you share your method? Can you share your method with all of us? All right, cannot hear me. She says I'm breaking here. Let me see. Perhaps without wasting further time, let's carry on. Now the 20% of 400 means that you will actually convert your 20% into a fraction. And of course, this becomes 20 out of 100, and then you multiply that by the 400. And of course, once you have done your calculations, you will see that 20% of 400 is actually 80. That's 80. Because 20% of each 100 is 20. So if you've got 400, then you have 20 times 4, which is 80. So 20% of 400 will be 80. And the last one, 37%. The last one. Is there a hand for the last one? Again, for the last one, you'll have 37% after you multiply everything by 700. And of course, you will see that the answer that you will get there will be 259. Therefore, 37% of 700 will be 259. So you should be at this point able to calculate a percentage of a number. And of course, it takes us to the next activity. This is just the solution that I have for the previous activity. As you can see, 1% of 400, we said that 1% is 1 over 100, and you multiply that by 400 to get 4, as Peg said initially. And of course, the second one, 20% of 400 becomes now 80. And the last one, 37% of 700 becomes now .
Hi everyone, we are just experiencing a bit of technical difficulties. We will be right back.